Okay, so what if I told you that one of the greatest painters of the Baroque era was also, get this, a high-stakes diplomat and a business mogul who completely revolutionized the art market? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the surprising, multifaceted genius of Peter Paul Rubens. I mean, just take a look at this. This is the fall of Phaeton. It's pure, uncut Rubens. You can almost feel the heat coming off that sun chariot, right? You can hear the chaos as these bodies and horses are just tumbling from the sky. This is exactly the kind of explosive, larger-than-life drama that made him an absolute legend. Now, chances are, if you've heard his name, you've probably heard this term, Rubenesque. It's become the go-to description for his style of painting these really vibrant, powerful, full-bodied figures. And for a lot of people, that's pretty much where the story of Rubens begins and ends. But is that really all there is to him? I mean, just a single adjective for a guy who was moving in the shadows of European power and literally shaping international politics? Yeah, we think there's a much bigger and way more fascinating story to uncover here. Because the man himself was just so much more complex and honestly way more surprising than his most famous stylistic trait might lead you to believe. So let's just dive right in. I want you to forget the image of some reclusive artist locked away in a dusty studio. Peter Paul Rubens was a power broker. He was a diplomat operating at the absolute highest levels of 17th century European politics. And listen, this wasn't some kind of side gig for him. No way. He was a deeply respected scholar and a trusted diplomat for kings and queens. I mean, to even get in those rooms, he had to be fluent in 5 different languages. Just imagine that. You're not just painting for the most powerful people in the world, you're negotiating peace treaties for them. So those language skills, they weren't just impressive. They were basically the keys that unlocked the most exclusive royal courts in all of Europe. And his knack for diplomacy? Well, that's what put him at the table, negotiating policy and peace between actual warring nations. And we're talking about the absolute A-listers of the time. Patrons like Marie de Medici in France and King Philip IV of Spain, they weren't just buying paintings from him. Oh, no. They were trusting their artist with state secrets, with covert missions. His art was often the perfect cover for all his political work. Which, brings up a pretty obvious question, right? If this guy is so busy brokering deals between nations, how on earth did he manage to be one of the most productive artists in all of history? Well, the answer reveals this whole other side of Rubens, the brilliant businessman. He didn't just run a studio. He basically pioneered what you could call an art factory, and he operated with the mind of a modern CEO. Just take a moment and look at this number. Over 1,400 pieces of art are attributed to him and his workshop. That kind of scale, that kind of production was simply unheard of back then. So how in the world did he pull it off? He developed this revolutionary system. So first, Rubens himself would create the initial brilliant design, the whole concept. Then his team of top-tier assistants, and we're talking future masters here like Anthony van Dyck, they would paint the larger sections. And then finally, the master himself would sweep in to add those finishing touches, the details that made it an undeniable Rubens. It was less of a studio and more of a luxury brand with incredible quality control. Okay, so we have the diplomat and the CEO, but how did these other lives, the travel, the politics, the business, how did they actually influence the art itself? Well, understanding the man behind the canvas lets us see his famous style in a completely new light. You see, his secret weapon was fusion. Because of all his travels, especially in Italy, he totally absorbed the harmony and the idealized beauty of the Italian Renaissance. Then he basically crashed that style into the gritty realism and rich detail of his own Northern European tradition. The result was something totally dynamic, totally new, and uniquely his. And this right here gets to the very core of his appeal. While a lot of other Baroque painters were off exploring these moody, dramatic shadows, Rubens' work just explodes with life. It's fundamentally a celebration. You can feel the optimism of a man who was, let's be honest, just winning at life. And, a lot of that joy, it came from a very personal source, too. His second wife, the young and beautiful Helene Formant, became his muse. She shows up again and again in his later works, which are some of his most personal and celebratory paintings. You can literally see his happiness right there on the canvas. So, let's come back to where we started. Looking at this painting now, we see so much more than just chaos. We see the classical forms of Italy. We see the fine detail of the North. And layered over all of it is that signature Rubens energy. It's the work of a diplomat, a mogul, and a master artist who saw the world in all its complexity and just chose to paint its vitality. And all of this led to a legacy of success that went far beyond the canvas. And it really shatters one of our most persistent cultural myths. You know that romantic idea of the starving artist? Well, Rubens just completely flips that script. He wasn't discovered after he died. He died at the absolute height of his fame, internationally honored and incredibly wealthy. He was a resounding success in every single sense of the word. So, who was Peter Paul Rubens? Was he an artist, a diplomat, a CEO? The truth is, he was all of them. And his story really leaves us with a bigger question. What combination of raw talent, political savvy, and sheer business acumen does it take to not just create masterpieces, but to build an empire?